So Mary, I guess, will be the only one who's truly.
Yeah, she said she wouldn't be here till 7 or so.
Okay. Aloha.
I hear it
Hey,
unmuted.
Sean.
Wait, you guys ready to be unmuted?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I guess so.
Okay, this is the Open Space and Ecology Committee special meeting on Monday, August 5th, to review more chapters of the draft EIR. We are going to do them in the order of that we selected to do them tonight, which would be 4J, and then, which is noise and vibration, then 4D, which is cultural resources, and then go back to 4A if we have time. So do we have an adoption of the agenda with that change?
I so move.
I'll second. Oh, comments before we?
So we're going to discuss the looking at the remainder of the DEIR, because I had a couple of changes I wanted to suggest in that, so I don't know if you want to do that first.
Say that again, how we're going to review the remainder of the DEIR?
Well, on the agenda, it's listed as the last item. I was wondering if you wanted to maybe reverse the order.
Would you like to reverse the order?
Yeah.
Okay, then everybody else good with reversing the order?
Sure.
Okay, so can we have a new motion to approve the agenda with B being ahead of A being 4J, 4D, and then 4A?
So moved. Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we'll start with a reviewing of the remainder of the DEIR, which I'm actually happy to do because I wanted to mention a few things that Lord Zola had mentioned in his presentation. And what night was it? I guess it was, he stressed this a couple times, but this was on June 18th, which was, I think, one of his first ones. And he said, the level of impacts that have been analyzed becomes the benchmark for the project EIR for the site-specific development. The program EIR does site-specific have new impacts, and will the impacts be significantly more severe than the program EIR. And this is the program EIR as well as the site-specific project EIR for the site-specific development. And if it is more severe, then there would have to be supplemental or subsequent EIRs, because he stressed this several times. This document, when it is done, establishes the standards for comparison. And I just want to make that really, really clear to all of us that we cannot just broad brush certain things in here, or it will come back to haunt us time and time again. And then I did want to go over the things that he said about noise and vibration and cultural resources. A couple of other things he said also that I wanted to remind everyone of was the threshold of significance is very important. And also, do we have to accept this? Do we have to accept the accepted thresholds? And the answer to that was, it really ultimately is up to the council and the city of Brisbane of what we're willing to accept. And then he said, don't just look at the numbers, what does it really mean? And I just want to remind people about, especially going into chapter 4J, where we're talking a lot about noise and vibration and decibels and how they calculate it, and basically stressed about don't just look at the numbers, but what do they really mean in terms of people and the environment. So Glenn, you had some suggestions?
Yes, I wanted to propose a change in the order in which we're going to review the remainder of the DEIR, and that is because I finally managed to catch up, and I've started working on greenhouse gas emissions for August 14th, but partly in order to understand better the greenhouse section of the DEIR, I read ahead to the energy section, and on that basis, I think it makes sense to review greenhouse gases in the energy section together at the same meeting rather than try to deal with, let's see,
Geology, soils, and seismicity.
yeah. You know, part of the energy section talks about just the transmission facilities and so forth that are out there, but obviously there's a big overlap between energy and greenhouse gases, and so it just, I feel really makes sense to do that together. And I wrote an email to Barbara and Kima asking whether they'd have any objections to that, because Kima and Barbara are doing the energy section, and Barbara and I are doing the greenhouse section. What I was thinking was maybe we could, all three of us, do both of those sections.
That's fine with me. I want to offer up something. My husband is also, he's at sitcom, so he's on a different schedule. But he said that in reading greenhouse gas emissions, he felt like that he needed to read traffic and circulation because of where all the numbers come from, or a lot of the numbers come from. So I'm wondering if we want to do greenhouse gases after traffic and circulation, but as to your request, Glenn, I'm absolutely, perfectly, happily, wonderful, fine with that.
Thank you for the enthusiasm. Now, when we were first batting around the idea of how to divvy this up, traffic and circulation does have a big greenhouse impact. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, it makes sense to look at those three all in one big.
I think it's too much to do in one, but.
It is kind of too much, and I'm not sure how we would do it. And also, there are other traffic issues besides greenhouse gases. I mean, there's like convenience and safety and things like that. So maybe, sorry to bring this up yet again, but maybe we should talk about it a little bit and try to figure out how to get a handle on this.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe if we moved traffic and circulation up the schedule and greenhouse gases down the schedule, so that we were not necessarily doing them on the same time, but that one superseded the other.
So let me get the order of it correctly. The ideal order would be traffic and circulation, mm-hmm. and then greenhouse gases, and then energy resources. Is that where we're at so far?
Well, is air quality going to tie in with greenhouse gas emissions?
I don't think so much, because they're different pollutants.
Okay.
Okay. And so these three are kind of like a 1, 2, 3, kind of an order of them.
I'm not sure it makes sense even to do them in a sequence. We have to, I suppose, place our comments in the part of the DEIR where we want them to go. But it seems to me that in thinking about greenhouse gases, you want to consider all those issues. So I'm not sure I agree with you, Barbara, about reversing the order of sections. But I don't know what that, I'm not sure then what exactly we should do about it. And I am most ready to do greenhouse gases and energy on August the 14th. I haven't even started the traffic and circulation yet. Mm-hmm. And I would like a co-worker with me on that anyway.
Okay. So you're suggesting we do greenhouse gases and energy resources on the 14th.
Mm-hmm. And I will volunteer to read the part of the traffic and circulation that is relevant to greenhouse gases.
Okay.
And pitch in with that on the 14th, too.
Geology, soils, and seismicity doesn't have a home yet, then.
Right.
So we move it to Tahiti?
Well, it could go with hazards.
It would be a bad thing to do to Tahiti, though, wouldn't
I
it?
don't know.
Yeah, let's put that with August 29th, then.
I'm sorry.
Geology, soils, and seismicity, although Mary had felt that hazards and hazardous materials would take an entire meeting.
And I bet she's right.
Yeah, I say she probably is.
Okay, so then,
When do we hear from the council, Stuart?
They're meeting on the 19th.
Okay, so we'll know.
well, let's move it to Saturday, August 24th.
Now, what doesn't have a home?
The,
Soils, seismicity,
Oh, okay.
because Energy Resources had not had a home. So going once, going twice, how about the August 24th? Is there appetite to make that meeting longer than the 3 hours we have scheduled?
no.
Ouch.
Okay. Then we'll just try to get through it on the same day. But as,
I mean, one of the thoughts is if they extend on August 19th,
then I would not want to have the meeting on the 24th.
Saturday.
Wait a minute, isn't soils and seismicity already on the 14th?
Yes, but we're
but it's
taking it
right.
off the 14th
Oh,
You
so that we
just
can
set
put
it up.
Energy Resources
right,
there.
your 14th
Aye.
is a regular meeting. We had other things that we were going to bring to you, such as the climate action plan. Well, not the climate, but talking about the climate action plan, talking about Zipcar. You probably should have some level of conversation about the day in the park.
Yeah.
So, I
And
mean, I think there's other things that you're going to want to talk about that may take,
half the meeting, a third of the meeting?
yeah, like an hour.
Yeah, we're
I mean,
gonna
it's
have
up
to
to you
really-
how long it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, move that along.
One of my hopes in proposing this change with the greenhouse gases is that it would actually go faster than it would if we did all these things separately.
So soils and seismicity is going where again now?
You put it to Saturday, the 24th.
That means we have 3 things to do on the 24th. Public services, surface water and hydrology and water quality, geology, soils, and seismicity.
Yike.
that's a lot of pages.
I already had 3 things, because I have biological resources on the 24th as well.
Oh, right. Oh, no, we can't do that much on the
Right, well,
24th.
I mean, and the question is if they, let's say council moves it back a month to a month and a half to 2 months or to January 31st, would you still want to have a meeting on Saturday, the 24th, or would you want to cancel that meeting?
I would want to cancel it because
I would too.
I feel like I don't have a life right now.
Okay,
I
so-
didn't even get through the reading
No, I
from
understand.
last meeting to this meeting.
Okay, because if
I'm
I was,
not
if I
here
was a
for the
betting person, I would bet that we would move it at least a week.
That they'll give us some slack, although
There will be, my bet is that there will be some time.
maybe not what we asked for, but some.
I'm a conservative person, you know that by nature. That's what I mean, if I'm in finance, I'm conservative.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure what they would do, because I'm never going to, second guess what council does.
All right.
But
So at this point, we're going to put greenhouse gases and energy resources on the 14th of August.
Plus whatever is relevant of the traffic.
And, no,
I'm not getting those packets.
The,
traffic and circulation? No.
well, the greenhouse impact of traffic.
And you gotta read that section to pick it out.
We also, okay. You can refer to it, I guess.
Yeah, since so much of the greenhouse impact of this project, especially the community variance.
Print it out.
Well,
is
that's why I
attributable
asked, did you want to do
traffic.
traffic and circulation first and do them in the order that Barbara suggested? So,
No, because it involves a lot of other issues besides greenhouse gases.
okay.
I'm just concerned that the 14th meeting is, we're going to be running until 11. If we try and do 3 chapters or 2.5 chapters plus a regular meeting.
Well, at this point, we're doing greenhouse gases, and energy resources, and if someone needs to refer to traffic and circulation, fine.
Okay.
That'll work.
Traffic and circulation will have its own session, in which we'll refer back to greenhouse gases, no doubt,
Right.
because it's all interwoven. I mean, and it's kind of this rabbit warren, because like tonight, it referred me to biological resources. And then I went to biological resources and could find nothing about how pile driving affects burrowing owls or any of the other animals that live there and the
Right.
fish. So,
I mean, my impression a lot of this is consistency between chapters is part of what needs to be commented on. Excuse me.
besides the basic lacking of information. Okay, so back to this. Sorry to have to do this again, but greenhouse gases and energy resources are on August 14th. That's our next meeting. Okay, the next meeting after that is August 24th. That's a Saturday, 3 hours from 11 to 2. we cannot do more than 3 chapters, maybe 2. Okay? At this point, on August 24th, we have scheduled biological resources, water hydrology, and recreational resources. Does that stand? If,
Wait, public service.
I got public services, not recreation.
oh, I'm sorry, public services, excuse me. Does that stand? Public services really doesn't belong with the other 2. It was just kind of a throw-in because we weren't going to cover it at all.
Right, so you could do,
Wait, I've got 4 still on, so is soils and seismicities not moved to the 24th then?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
I mean, you can move the soils and seismicity there and just put public services at some later date. Keep kicking that can down the road.
Sure.
That's up to you, not me.
Michelle, I don't think we should bend ourselves out of shape trying to schedule everything now. Let's
Yep, but we have
See
to
what
have
the
the schedule for the
council
24th in case the council does not.
right for the 24th, yeah, but
So for the 24th, we are going to have biological resources, water hydrology, and water quality. And
Do you want geology or do you want public services?
I think public services.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
because-
we'll hold the geology off.
Right, because I think geology, soils, and seismicity is kind of really important. Okay, and I just don't think we'll get to it that day.
yeah.
All right, so that's kind of the revision for now. Is that all right, Stuart? I'm sorry you made this.
I'm good.
And when you arrange this again, when you publish this, this list again, could you publish it in the order of the dates?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that would help.
And then on August 14th, which do you want to discuss first, greenhouse gases or energy resources?
Greenhouse gases, I guess.
Okay, so it'll be greenhouse gases, then energy resources. On the 24th, what do you want to discuss first? Biological resources, surface water and hydrology. I think surface water and hydrology first, biological resources second, public services third.
Fine with me.
Good by me.
Okay. And then the next meeting after that was tentatively the 29th, in which we have hazardous materials alone. And the meeting after that is September 18th, September 11th, excuse me, population and housing. That's the only item we have on September 11th.
Right, because that would be a regular scheduled meeting as well, and we'd have
Right,
other things on it.
right. And I would say that if we do get an extension of time, I would like to take that off the agenda for the 11th, because I would like to be here to discuss that. But I won't be here on the 11th. Okay. And then the 18th, we have traffic and circulation and air quality, which seemed to be a pair that went together.
Yeah.
And the other things, the 28th, the other things aren't scheduled yet, so we do need to still schedule those somewhere. Okay, does that sound good for everybody?
Stuart, I need a hard copy of this, please.
Okay.
I haven't gotten one yet. Even though it's going to be, but now it's going to be revised, so there's no
Right.
problem. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just handed one out today.
Right, and he has
Everybody.
that.
Yeah,
right,
but
exactly, I've got
A
that.
new hard copy.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
But I need a new hard copy of the email that sent out on August 2nd,
Okay.
but the corrected format.
Kima, is August 14th okay with you to do?
Got it.
okay. Okay, so are we ready to move on to?
Just come by tomorrow, Sean, or the day after. I'll just leave it on the front counter.
Okay.
We'll see if no one steals it this time.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the next section we're going to do is noise and vibration. And when Lloyd Zola went over this, he said that the key issues addressed were the construction and operation noise, effects of ground-borne vibration on people and historic structures. And then he said significant, can I, before I do this, can I ask this question, Stuart? Can we get a copy of the notice of preparation, or all the things that were supposed to be addressed? Because there were several things that were brought up in that I'm not finding in this document. And so I'd kind of like a list of what was decided to not be addressed. from the notice of preparation comments. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
We made all the notice of preparation comments.
Oh, you mean,
Yes, the scoping, from the scoping session. From the scoping session.
Yeah.
I would like to know what things they decided not to address that were brought up in the scoping session. So I'd like to know all the things that were in the scoping session and then what things they decided not to address. Because I am definitely not seeing things I asked to be addressed at that time, and I'm not finding them in the document so far. So it would help me to not have to run around looking for it. Anyway, so the main thing that I wanted to go over before we start the noise and vibration, he talked about the exposure to people and generation of excessive noise, exposure to people or generation of excessive noise of ground-borne vibration, temporary or periodic increases, exposure of people to excessive airport-related noise, exposure of people to excessive private airstrip-related noise. And then he talked about the methods of mitigation, building construction methods, vibration isolation methods to protect new buildings, performance standards for pile driving near historic buildings. And then key terminology, he went over decibels, which is a unit to measure noise, often expressed as an A scale of dBA reflecting human hearing characteristics. He went over LEQ, which is a sound level over a specified period of time, typically 1 hour, also specified over portions of an hour, which is L50, L25, and L5. Those are, and then Lmax, which is instantaneous maximum noise level, DNL, which is day-night noise level, average noise levels over a day, penalizing nighttime noise, and CNL, community noise equivalent level, which is the average noise levels over a day, penalizing evening and nighttime noise. So I just wanted to review those before we start in on noise. And so, Elena, you get to lead this section.
okay, I've never led a section.
It's so exciting.
Okay, well, I've read this several times, and I'm not going to pretend that I know how to calculate decibels, I'm sorry. But as I went through it, it appeared that many of the monitored areas in Brisbane are already at the maximum decibel levels. 65 is exterior level max, and 45 is interior level max. If you look at the chart that shows where on page 4J7, where it shows where they monitored the sounds, number 7 is Central Brisbane. It's already above. It's at 70, and the number 8, which is the resident area of Mission Blue, is also at 65. They did no monitoring at all in the residential areas in Brisbane, like, say, Madhouse Level and Kings Road, which sound kind of rolls up the hill, so it does get louder. And I'd like to see some monitoring in the residential area of Brisbane. And as Michelle had pointed out, the DNL and CNEL are basically two terms for similar things, and they use them interchangeably, which confuses you. It doesn't help make the document clearer. Okay. Let's see. In many of the conclusions, the report states that there's significant impact, either in noise level or in vibration levels, and then with mitigation, they would bring it to less than significant. And this is throughout the whole document, which I find it impossibly hard to believe that this would not make any significant difference if they could just mitigate everything away. I do think that with building materials and the way structures are built and placed, that you can mitigate interior noise levels pretty well. But exterior noise levels, traffic alone, the number of cars that are going to be going up and down Bayshore is not going to be able to be mitigated. Okay. It would be nice if this document showed, what does 65 decibels sound like? What is 45? Is it a gunshot? Is it, I mean, how noisy is an airplane when it flies over? There's no layperson's point of reference as to just how noisy this is. So that would be nice. I had an issue with the Bay Trail. I don't know the origin of how it got selected to be put along Highway 101, but, you know, if you cross the Bay Bridge, you have spectacular vistas, and you're crossing an iconic monument. So you don't mind walking along a freeway, but why would anybody want to walk along a freeway? I don't know. And it's going to be really noisy. But I suggested that maybe there was some other more scenic route, maybe through the development, that would be better for the Bay Trail, just to be prettier and quieter and cleaner. They say that they would use wall barriers to mitigate some of the freeway noise. I didn't see any images of that in 4C. It should show what a wall barrier would look like. The only ones I'm really familiar with are between Central San Rafael and the Frank Lloyd Wright Civic Center. Both sides of the freeway have wall barriers with neighborhoods right behind them. So they should show us what that would look like, because it's not reflected in any of the images in 4C.
Or 4A.
4A, sorry. Let's look at Barbara's comments. I basically came to the conclusion that the traffic alone is going to make Brisbane a much noisier area. Okay. I believe there's another portion of the, what, Barbara, help me with this?
Sure.
Okay.
I believe that there's another portion of the DEIR that says there is residential bordering the project,
Good call.
and also it seems to show that in Figure 4J2, but on page 4J6, it says there isn't any residential bordering the project.
Good catch. I caught that one too.
So
Over my head.
maybe that should have been,
When we went through the
yeah.
site description, they said that it bordered neighborhoods.
Okay.
And then in this, it says that it borders no residential neighborhoods.
Okay.
yeah, so.
Which was why it was important to go through Chapter 3 detail by detail.
Yeah, and then on page 21, it talks about orienting the buildings to minimize sound intrusion, and I just thought, God, you know, if we are orienting the buildings for solar, and if we are orienting the buildings to minimize the disruption of wind patterns on the bay, and now we're minimizing them for sound orientation too, we're going to have the buildings on rotating pedestals. You know, because this is just not a practical or feasible mitigation measure. It's nice thinking, guys, but I don't think it's going to work. Closest existing off-site sensitive use would be over 1,000 feet to north, and I'm just wondering, what are they referring to?
What are you talking about exactly?
Page 24, the first paragraph.
Would that be Liz Valley?
It probably, but they just, in two different places, they refer to this off-site sensitive area, but they never specify it. And I just don't like it when they just use these non-specific nouns so that things are penultimately confusing. I just felt they needed to clarify that.
The sensitive area is probably referring to
Ecology.
Little Holiday.
I would
Little
think so, too.
Little Hollywood.
I bet.
I would
They
think
need
so,
to
too.
specify that that is a residential sensitive area.
Yeah, I just felt that was a little,
And sensitive in which way?
Well, they have areas that they define early in the chapter as being sensitive versus less sensitive, based on whether it's residential, hotel, or industrial,
Recreation.
or recreation.
yeah.
Not the lands themselves.
No, they avoided talking about that in section 4J and refer you to the biological resources section where they yet again don't talk about it in depth.
And then page 29, from early in the chapter, we know that the doubling of sound energy raises the dB from 50 to 53. But then on the fourth paragraph, it says there would be an increase of 10 decibels. Well, if 3 decibels is doubling the sound energy, what's 10 decibels going to do? You know, and this goes to Mary's point about,
It's not sound energy,
okay,
because they make that very clear at the beginning, that they're not talking about sound energy. They're only talking about sound pressure levels.
pressure levels, okay, you're right, I misspoke.
And
But
that's
I'm
an important
still-
distinction.
Still wondering what that translates into in real,
Agony, yeah. Okay.
yeah. I agree with you very much there, Mary. You spent a lot more time on that subject, which I really appreciate, because that was a very important subject that I only just barely glossed over in my analysis. The study seems to assume that there's no impacts on Old Brisbane due to the distance. Like, I didn't really find anywhere in here
Right, there isn't anything.
it addresses Brisbane. But we know from our previous experiences with the Caltrain improvements that this is not going to be the case. And that, you know, when they were doing the pile driving, the data from the pile driving out at Sierra Point, you know, 91 dBA at 200 feet, well, that's more than the chart shows that pile driving is supposed to generate. So clearly, there's some discrepancies here that I think need to be put into real-world terms.
They did say that there was a mitigation measure where you pre-drill the pile shafts, which I would encourage the city to demand, because that really should help. That pile driving when they built the bridge was horrible.
Yeah.
Just one kind of supplementary comment on that. Brisbane is configured
Like an amphitheater.
like an amphitheater, and so you really get very different sound impacts in different parts of the city, including some that you might not expect to get because you're actually a little bit further away, but due to the way the sound travels here, you feel like you're right on top of it. So I strongly agree with what you said, that they need to do some measuring.
They made him monitor the higher elevations of the town of Old Brisbane.
Because Mary was saying, Mary lives up on Kings Road, that she gets certain sounds very loud up there. The same things happen to me in various parts of Brisbane, so that's really important.
Could the SFIA hearing, sound station at Margaret Tank, the recordings for that be incorporated into this study? Because they've been doing ongoing measurement of sound and recording of sound at the Margaret Tank for quite some time. Years. And that would pick up all of that type of noise. I mean, it already is picking that type of noise up. And it'd be interesting to see the decibels we're getting from that recorder.
And also the one at 1 Solano Street, I don't know if that was a permanent one or a temporary one for the airport noise.
Oh, good.
The pre-drilling sounds like a good idea, but it brings up other issues, actually literally brings up other issues. Because when you pre-drill, what are you drilling through? And what is that substance going to be when you bring it up with the pre-drill? Are you drilling through, what the hell are you drilling through? Toxins, tires, garbage, what? And so there are risks associated with pre-drilling that you wouldn't have with just normal pounding it down into the ground pile driving. So I think that even though pre-drilling would minimize the vibration and noise, if the decision is made to pre-drill, they should also address what the risks of pre-drilling are, especially in areas where they haven't done any pilot wells at all, to determine what the matrix is under the site-specific plan.
And I just had another thought. The study says piles, but do we know if they mean piles or caissons? Because those are two different things. And they have different mechanics. So perhaps that should be a question for clarification.
Another mitigation measure for vibrations, digging wave ditches where they catch the waves. And that should be, along the Caltrans lines on both or either sides to mitigate some of the railroad noise.
So has that been studied in this document, or did they mention that?
They mentioned that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did mention.
It's a
that-
mitigation measure the city has to demand.
Yeah,
Okay.
they did mention it's a very limited, it's kind of a limited technology because it depends on the wavelengths and such. It's a little difficult.
And I think it would also depend on the substrate that they're having to dig through.
Yeah.
Again, a problem.
There was a sensitive, one of the sensitive receptors is the roundhouse, and it did seem that the report was going to address the sensitivity of that building being frail, and that they would be careful not to topple it over with vibration and construction noise. Let's see, pile driving. I don't know why they say there's no impact on the proposed school. It said that several times. And that we're out of the fly zone for SFO.
Yeah, I included the map.
I know what map, but the thing is, that one.
Yeah, that's definitely still in the fly zone.
Yeah, the upper map is the prescribed flight path.
It goes
and
right
the
over it.
lower map shows what is actually happening.
Great.
Do we have copies of that for us?
You know, I did not print enough.
Stuart, you could have
Can
my
I email it
copy.
to you?
No,
Or-
I can go print one now and give Michelle back hers.
Okay,
Here we go. Kima.
It's quite good.
You were hiding it from me, Barbara.
I am.
Purposely, I know it.
And I also didn't bring enough copies for the notes, so
I'll run copies.
Yeah, we're right on.
well, I don't want to give mine because
Right.
I know.
That's something that has to be corrected.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, because later in the chapter, they said that they have to assume, towards the end of the chapter, and I didn't put it down because I just made me throw up my hands in the air, they say, well, we have to, the DEIR is based on what's supposed to be happening, and what's supposed to be happening is that they're supposed to be flying on their flight path, and so that is the only thing that we can take into account,
No.
basically, was what the paragraph said. Is because, yeah. and it-
Well, they might assume that because,
Sean's.
but it's not the law that they have to fly on the prescribed thing, and CEQA only addresses what is the law, so therefore they're wrong.
Okay,
They do have to, I think. accept
okay,
that.
well, that's a very
Sorry,
good
Mary,
point.
didn't mean to interrupt, but.
Well, they also have to do it if the city of Brisbane tells them they have to do it. I mean, you know, this draft DIR is going to be acceptable or not acceptable to the Brisbane Planning Commission and City Council, so.
Okay, and then the noise of the wind turbines was basically dependent on what size turbine was used and how, that would determine what setbacks were required.
I also came up with something on turbines. Page 31 indicates that, or the preceding page indicates that two turbines near each other can combine to create a thumping. Therefore, the mitigation measures should include a minimum distance between wind turbines to eliminate this effect. But it doesn't. But that's a very, definitely that should be in the mitigation measures.
Okay, well,
Just solicit if you want.
I have several
okay.
comments, but I did my normal go through it, like,
Okay.
you know, kind of. So I don't know if Mary wants to go through hers first before I get into the weeds or not.
I still have more, and we can come back to them?
No, go ahead.
Whatever.
Oh,
Okay.
That's right. Page 2.
Oh, there is, wait, where's page 2?
So,
Page one.
yeah, so that was, Mary made that point, so I'll just skip over that one, because I don't need to waste our
No,
time.
This is for aid.
thought that figure 4J-2 should include the proposed school, because it has proposed parks and existing schools, but it doesn't have the proposed school. So I thought that was the
Right.
mission.
Okay.
Then we already talked about the airport noise.
Ooh, psychological effects should include migraines and tension.
Yeah. And on 25, mitigation measures place the burden on the citizens for reporting and the city for action. And I felt a much more effective mitigation strategy would be to install listening stations that monitor and record noise events, possibly even send out an alarm to somewhere, so that we're, because us as citizens, we only have so much time to be like manning this, and some of us will, but I still don't feel that it is proper, this is a proper mitigation measure to put all the burden on the citizens reporting, and then the city to figure out what the heck to do about it.
Those monitors cost about $3,500 each, and to rent them, it's about $1,000 a month. And they have software you download, and you have to leave them for 24 to 48 hours to get a true reading. But who's got time and money to do that?
Yeah,
The project should be doing it.
Yeah.
The project, it should be part of their mitigation measures. I don't think it should be the city's burden.
or the people's burden,
No.
because
Or the
that
people's
is
burden.
definitely burdensome.
Yes. I already did the wind turbines. And on page 32, the chart that uses the sound data for the equipment is from 1971. Don't they have something more recent than that? I feel that that's out of date and inappropriate. And then there was just a typo, I thought, on page 31. But that's just, the second bullet reads, in order to meet performance standards of 5 dBA, and I thought that they meant not greater than 5 dBA. Perhaps I'm wrong, maybe I misread that. Yeah. But in the next bullet, they do say not greater than, so they should either be consistent in their shorthand or
What page are you on?
make it clear. That was on page 31, the second bullet. I get a little, I do my best to stay focused, and I reread a lot of this, but sometimes I go like, am I left or right? So I like to, even the stupid things, I like to bounce off the rest of the committee so that I'm not
Great.
making ridiculous statements.
Thank you.
And that was it for me.
Okay. More comments, Mary?
I agree with, I'm reading Ellen's comments, and I agree about an alternate Bay Trail route. It seems, I thought there was an alternate route in the community prepared plan, but I guess I'm wrong about that. So I think that one of our comments should develop that idea, that in addition to being bad air and very noisy,
And not very pretty.
and not very, it's not very pretty, and that whatever plan is approved, and I doubt that we'll be the only people to say this, but that our comments should develop that a little bit and make it,
Right, that probably should be like when we get to the recreational uses. That's probably a comment in that chapter, right? I mean, that's just some thinking where,
Can we make a note of that so that we don't
I'm
forget when we get
yeah, I've got that noted.
Chapter, and I'm already thinking in that.
And you would address it in air quality also.
Fail quite a bit.
You might. I mean, it depends on where they put the Bay Trail as a recreational use. Because that's where I would think that's where you'd make the comment that you would want to see an alternative to where this would be. And then, of course, if they make a change to where that is in the recreational use chapter, then they need to change everything else that relates to it in whatever subsequent, all the intertying chapters. Okay. I mean, I think that's how this would, and we could make that comment that, we would think that a different route for the recreational, for the Bay Trail should take this route And, this should then be studied as part of the air quality and part of the noise and vibration. And I think that's I think that's how you do it. I could check with John to see if I've got, the process right. And we are running, I've asked John to take a look at or Christina's asked John to take a look at at some of the previous comments that were written to see if at least the form is correct. And then we'll bring them back to you so you can see what we're doing.
Then the other major issue that I see in this is that it's like indecipherable, I mean, I don't know how much time it would, I don't know how much time it would take somebody to actually read through this chapter and understand what was going on. And I think it should be something that you can, pull a paragraph out and somebody on the street of Brisbane can understand how this is going to affect their home or their business or their recreation.
Or their life.
Yeah, their whole life. And that's not happening here. It doesn't give an indication, it says that the residential areas are in the 65 dBA contour. Well, where are we now?
There.
If
We're there. We're at that level.
we are,
For
really?
peak experiences, yeah, during the day.
For what,
On the map, it'll show you that the central Brisbane, right here, is at 70 already, and the ridge is at 60, 65. So, and they haven't done Upper Brisbane, so we're already at the higher levels of sound.
At the monitoring
At the
stations.
well, right. So anything additional is just going to be bad.
yeah, I mean, my house is quiet. When I hear a dog bark, I notice it.
Inside, but outside, when I first moved to town, I wanted to camp out because it was City of the Stars.
Yeah.
Put up my sleeping bag, laid down, and heard a semi-downshift. And I said, no, this is too noisy. It's outside, it's very noisy.
I think the peak experiences in town are high. I think, you can hit times when it's, because, we live on Santa Clara and everything, I agree with you, everything funnels up. So if there's no soccer game and there's nothing going on at the park, there's no airplane and no dogs barking, it's pretty quiet where we live.
All you hear is 101.
Well, we really don't because we're blocked from that kind
Yeah,
of.
you're facing the other direction. I hear it constantly.
Yeah.
I hear it.
I heard the
Depends on.
Jay-Z concert
Yeah.
till 11 o'clock.
I
So
didn't,
lucky
and I didn't
you, it
know-
was free.
I thought that was, I thought, and I
It
thought
was the
that,
percussion, no.
I thought that was the concert in the park, because we were the concert in,
Oh, I do too. And it's really weird because it depends on when I'm walking home. There's like a portion in San Francisco that kind of fades. I turn the corner, come on Santa Clara, I can't hear it at all. And then I get past the house, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm there again.
so we're hearing this concert from Candlestick and thinking, I thought the concerts in the park were supposed to end a lot
Right.
before this. And if that's
filed a
true,
complaint with the
then
city.
we're going to be, then Central Brisbane is going to be able to hear a lot of what goes on the Baylands. If you
Yeah.
can hear that much from Candlestick.
I mean, I remember when hearing the catch, during the great football game.
Oh,
And,
the crowd.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I could hear the crowds hollering. And then, Metallica, we actually got dressed and went down to the 23 Club because we thought they were having a Metallica. But I think that this dialogue points out how very inadequate this document is to address Brisbane's actual situation. And we run into this before when we talked about truck noise from, freight forwarders and backup beepers and everything else, about how Brisbane has some very unique sound issues, and they have not been addressed as our unique issues. And that was in the scoping document. It was raised several times, and it's been virtually ignored with words like, generally and compared to existing environment, and a lot of descriptors that put it into the common way instead of the way that it is here with our unique set of circumstances in regard to sound and how it is attenuated across our different neighborhoods.
Yeah, I used to live up on Tulare, and when they were doing the pile driving for the Caltrain, I'd hear every one of those pile drives twice.
Yeah.
I'd hear it from the site,
did
and then
too.
I'd hear reverb off the mountain.
Yep.
And I heard every one of those pounds twice,
I did
almost
too.
equal stereo.
And yet, Mary is right that it is very quiet here, because on a quiet night out on our deck, we can hear distinctly conversations that are over 4 blocks away.
I'm not going to
Yes.
talk out on my deck anymore, okay?
Yeah, I mean, it freaked me out, because the first time I heard it, I went out on the back deck, and, I was out on the back deck, and I'm like, who's in our yard? And then I'm like, wow, oh my God, that's way down next to Visitation. It was somebody on their back deck, way down past the community center. I got out my binoculars to double check, and it was somebody down there
When is it
talking.
that quiet? You don't,
It was that quiet. It was
It
like
is.
1 in the morning, and it was
Oh, yeah.
that quiet.
wow.
I can hear people in front of the 23 Club because we have line of sight.
Yeah.
Clear there and
Right, you
directly
see
to
it, you hear it.
Community Park.
I mean, that's why the Romans built amphitheaters,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
because
The sound.
sound
Right.
travels up. I mean, it's wonderful.
And
Or not.
Not.
I think the Romans did it because the Greeks did it, actually.
Big copycats.
Wow.
But who did it better?
Probably right there. That's true.
Yeah, we did it by several hundred years, but anyways, we'll let you slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that, like, I didn't see the sound effects that we get in central Brisbane reflected. And I'm sure the Ridge has its own dynamic, because there's got to be a lot of echo from there.
Oh, they do have their own dynamic as exhibited by the truck traffic in Crocker Industrial Park and the noise from the quarry and some of the other issues that they're dealing with. And then on Viewpoint, they get a lot of noise coming up from Bay Shore and the freeway. So, are you ready for my line-by-line comments?
I want
Or-
to do one more
Okay.
thing here. Of reading Mary's comments, the impact on the pipelines and the utilities around Kinder.
Oh, yeah,
I just want to bring
definitely.
up that we have that huge, huge gas line that runs underneath the Baylands, and with all of the vibrations, we could easily have another San Bruno.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah. I worked at 111 Pine Street when they built the building next door and pile drived that. And every afternoon at 3:30, they would start pile driving. And I would literally I was on the 11th floor, 12th floor, something like that. And at 3:30, it'd be like, I mean, literally, I would bounce out of my seat
God.
every time that hit the ground. And when most of you don't remember, I don't know if any of you would remember when they did the pile driving for the tank farm,
I wasn't here then.
but it made people go insane. It went on for 6 months.
Wow.
It seemed like it was 6 months. And then even though we did not have line of sight, everything in Brisbane would like jump. Pictures would fall off the walls, when they pile drove.
Yeah.
And it was extremely intense. And that was not on landfill. That was the actual tanks are, the areas where the pumps are obviously on landfill, because you can see the subsidence, but the actual tanks are on the excavated foot of Ice House Hill. So that was actually bedrock, and that transmitted through the mountain like you would not believe. And, I still remember it very vividly, that people just got to where they were like screaming in agony over that.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
I just want to make sure that we include the gas pipeline.
Yeah, I do too.
Where does that? I'm sure that's an aged pipeline.
It runs right through the,
Runs along, it runs along, what's the name of that road? Huh?
Tunnel?
Is that tunnel?
Well, I mean, it goes from Alameda over to here, across under the bay, into their site, and then it runs down to, there's another pipeline that runs down to the airport.
Yeah.
So it crosses,
it
it
comes down
crosses
Old
the whole
Clinton Road.
site.
I'm not talking about the
Old
fuel line. We have a big natural gas line underneath there too, don't we?
PG&Es.
Yeah, there's a big
that old-
PG.
Yeah, it's
little
marked.
gas line.
County Road.
Is that Old County Road there between Sierra Point and
I have to ask.
Tunnel?
I'm not quite sure,
I'm
Tunnel
pretty
and
sure,
Freeway
because it comes over the mountain to
is
get
Old
to.
County Road.
yeah, I'm pretty sure when that whole thing with
so.
San Bruno happened, that I saw a map for the natural, PG&E's natural gas lines, and I'm pretty sure there's a big trunk line that goes underneath
Lagoon Way.
part of the Baylands.
I think there's
Unless my memory's completely wrong.
section.
It could be,
I check.
yeah.
We could just add the comment, it'll be fine.
Comes over from Alameda.
Or I can, or maybe I'll find the map again.
But then
some
we're
point.
on-
So, my first, and probably, I don't know, it seems to me so obvious, but on page 1, when they're talking about sound, and then they're talking about all the different kinds of sounds, and it says, based on these concepts, actual sound energy, loudness at the source and loudness of the sound at the receiver's distance from the source are two measures of sound magnitude. The first is sound power level, which measures the sound energy created at the source. The second is sound pressure level, which is the common measurement of the loudness of a sound at a given observer location. Sound power belongs strictly to the sound source, while sound pressure is a measure of the receiver's distance from the source. Unless otherwise specified, all discussions of sound levels in this EIR refers to sound pressure levels. I have the most serious of objections to this because sound power level is so much more dangerous overall than just sound pressure level. Sound power level is the sound energy that's actually created at the source. And sound power is often what is the most detrimental to hearing, detrimental to animals, detrimental to all kinds of stuff. I mean, it is, and to completely set it aside and ignore it in this draft EIR is irresponsible, in my opinion. And I think that is a grave oversight and renders this document, the sound and noise vibration, I'm like, I cannot believe that you are not talking at all about the sound power level and the sound energy that's created that can blow out your eardrums if you're standing next to it or in very close proximity or, just happen to be driving by at the wrong time. And also, even with sound power levels, the sound energy created at the source, if that is also transmitted not just as sound pressure, but sound energy can be also, that's, concussions and implosions, and you hear about the concussive damage done from an explosion. That's the sound power level, not the sound pressure level. And so to leave that out, just to me is a grave oversight of the entire thing. So I consider that to be extremely inadequate. And they say sound power levels and sound pressure levels are often confused since they are both often referred to as sound levels and both are a measure of decibel or dB scale, which is the most common term used to characterize the loudness of sound. So I just find that really hard because they talk about detectable by the human ear, but there's a lot of sound and vibrations that are very damaging to humans that are not detected by the human ear. So I just find that absolutely amazing. I read that and I'm like, what? You're kidding. And so I go back to what Lloyd Zola said about don't just look at the numbers, what does it really mean? And to me, that's just amazing. And then one of the other things is they talk about decibels in these measurements of time, remember the L5, the L25, the L50, et cetera, in hour-long increments, but they do not talk about the damage long-term of 70 decibels over time. And I guess I'm particularly sensitive about hearing because both my grandmother and my father are, my grandmother was profoundly deaf and my father is profoundly deaf from industrial hearing loss, both concussive from World War II and persistent from working in the automotive trade and teaching for all those years. And it's a tragic thing to see someone who can't hear because of industrial or concussive hearing loss. And to mitigate that and not talk about exposure over time, I think is also grave oversight in this document. So over time, an hour, a half an hour, or whatever they're talking about when they do these trite little measurements, I think completely misses the larger point of what happens to human beings over a long exposure of time. Sorry to get on my soapbox about this, but,
Upsetting.
you know, I know a lot of people who say, you know, I don't really notice the noise on BART anymore. Oh, my God. You don't notice the noise on BART because you're now deaf in that tone from riding BART every day and hearing that screeching noise. So, and it says on page 2, however, noise levels rarely persist consistently over a long period of time, but when we're talking about a 20-year build-out, I consider that to be a long period of time. Even construction noise, where they characterize it as being temporary, is over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Effects, yeah?
I just wanted to say that's a good point, Michelle.
Yeah. Effects of noise on people. And on page 3, it talks about the psychological effects such as hearing loss or sudden startling. And then it goes on to talk about environmental noise typically produces effects in 2 categories. Working in industrial plants generally experience noise in the 3rd category. And those categories are 1, subjective effects of annoyance, nuisance, and dissatisfaction, which translates to a whole host of idiosyncrasies among society. Interference with activities such as sleep, speech, and learning, which I don't know if you've ever gone through any periods of sleep deprivation, but that can have a very catastrophic effect on people. And then psychological effects of hearing loss, which
Physiological.
physiological, sorry, and psychological effects of hearing loss, which are very profound. So I don't like the workers in an industrial plant generally experience in the 3rd category. There's no completely satisfactory way to measure the subjective effects of noise or the corresponding reactions of annoyance and dissatisfaction. You know, everybody has different tolerance levels. Dan doesn't seem to be bothered by the airplanes, but they make me crazy, you know? And then other people don't seem to be bothered by little humming noises, you know, but I can't stand them. And so I think that if they want to talk about how people react to it, they should pretty much survey everybody. And just this whole amount of, like, outside of a laboratory of 3 dBA changes considered just perceivably different, but everybody perceives sound differently, you know, and I think that it's very subjective, and especially the use of the logarithmic nature of the scale. And then on number 4, they talk about 250 dBA sources putting together would only be 53 dBA, not 100 dBA. And I understand how that happens with the logarithmic scale of combining noise. But what if they were staggered and there was no periods of relief? So you had a constant level of 50, 50, 50, 50, 53, 53, 53. And so I don't think they take that into account. And then they talk about widely distributed noise, such as a large industrial facility spread over many acres or street with moving vehicles, would typically attenuate at a lower rate, approximately 4 to 6 dBA per doubling of distance from the source. So that's kind of like the formula they're using, but as we have discussed at length, Brisbane is not typical with noise attenuation, and I think our particular situation needs to be studied and not just accept, you know, the typical attenuation rate of, you know, distance on flat ground or whatever. That's ridiculous to accept that when that's not our situation here at all. And then fundamentals of vibration. Ground-borne vibration can seriously be a concern for transit, et cetera, et cetera. And then it says, in contrast to airborne noise, ground-borne vibration is not a common environmental problem. Bullshit. I'm sorry. It is a very bad problem for animals and birds and gophers and burrowing owls and everything else, especially pile driving and blasting and heavy earth-moving equipment. Later on, it addresses that a little bit. And then it says that in the next paragraph down, it says VDB acts to compress the range of numbers required to describe vibration. Here again, typically, ground-board vibration generated by man-made activity attenuates rapidly with distance from the source of the vibration. Sensitive receptors for vibration include structures, people, and vibration-sensitive equipment. And it goes on to talk about the occasional blasting and pile driving, etc. But like liquefaction, sound and vibration depends on the medium in which it is traveling. And this is landfill that we're talking about for a lot of it. And it is, I don't think that you can apply the same attenuating rates and dissipation rates of the vibrations because this specifically depends on the medium, like liquefaction, and they haven't discussed what medium. They haven't even characterized properly the medium which the sound and vibrations are traveling through. And that I find to be extremely inadequate. And it says annoyance from vibration often occurs, the threshold perception by only a small margin. Well, it really depends on what the vibration is going through and what the margin is, and over time. And a good example of that, and I cite this as an example, is Mission San Miguel down in near Los Paso Robles. The mission was virtually destroyed, not by the earthquake, but by the constant freight trains running by it within, such a small distance, vibrating, the constant vibration of freight trains going by at high speeds, nearly shook this building to the ground. And so it wasn't the catastrophic earthquake that almost destroyed it. It was the constant vibration of the trains. They've now reduced the speed of the trains in that area to under 20 miles an hour when they go by the mission to prevent it from being completely destroyed now that they've worked on it and brought it back seismically to being able to be open.
Excuse me, Michelle, can you put these comments in a
Document like you did?
No.
Or
Can you summarize, not exactly summarize, but can you pull them together and just say, and say that,
do you know,
can
I know what you're saying, but you missed the part at the beginning where I talked about what Lord Zola said about this being the framework, that if we don't do this, where is that? This is the baseline of what we're doing. The level of impacts that have been analyzed becomes the benchmark for the project EIR for the site-specific development. The program EIR, does the site-specific have new points that will make impacts significantly more severe? Then a supplemental or subsequent EIR would be required. This document establishes the standards for comparison for everything that goes on after this. And if we are not specific in our comments, Mary, and have them address them at that level, they will again get brushed under the rug, and we will be living with it for a really long time. And I know this is tedious. It was tedious doing this. I haven't even gotten to the next chapter.
can you say, rather than giving typical examples, can you make projections based on the actual medium? Or, do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, you're saying, would they please examine the medium and then make projections based on the medium on which...
Well, isn't that what you're asking for?
Yeah, that is what I'm asking for.
Okay.
So that's where I'm expecting help, to say, we need them to, examine the specific medium in which the sound waves are going through. Examine our specific situation with sound and not refer to these, typically things.
I guess,
So I'm not sure what...
when you say you're expecting help to say this, I don't know who you're expecting help from.
You guys?
We don't have,
Them?
we don't, just sitting here and going through it, I would have to read it, okay? we have 2 interns. One of them, the one who's working on the EIR is going to be here for another month. And we don't have a staff person, unfortunately, which I think is going to be a
No,
really...
we'll have another one. We'll have somebody else coming in on August 19th. Who will be working on with you.
So, Stuart, am I not being clear about what I want for comments, or, I mean, should I fill in the gaps? Should I write the comment? I mean, I thought the whole purpose was to bring these up and ask for how we should.
Right. So, I mean, part of it is, you know, where, if somebody makes a comment, we're writing it down. We are trying to, we'll put it in the best wording that we can. That's why, we've asked John to take a look at what we've done to date, to see if we've got if we've got wording right, or if we need to change wording to get to a better answer. But also, part of it is for the committee to have a discussion to see if these are comments from the whole committee, or, I think you talked about this earlier. There may be comments that individuals may want to make, separate from the whole committee. And I think I think Michelle talked about that earlier as well. But, whatever is being said, we're taking copious notes. Christina's going through it and developing the comments. I'm looking at it to see if, from my perspective, listening to Lloyd, talking to John, if those make sense. We'll have John take a look at it. I think Christina's going to sit down with him on Thursday to talk about chapters 1, 2, and 3 to see if we're, if we moved in the right direction. After that, we would bring, hopefully bring that back to you. And then if John says, yeah, we are moving in the right direction, Christina's going to write up, chapters 4A and now 4J. And I think it's a reiterative process to see if we captured what you're thinking, what you're thinking. And also, after you see them in writing, does the whole committee think those are the ones that the committee wants to put forward, or, should some of them come from individuals who have made those comments? I mean, that's the process that I thought we were going to go through.
One of the things that might be helpful in this situation, Michelle, where you've identified 2 different situations in which Brisbane is atypical rather than typical.
Right.
Then shouldn't we be asking that this report be written with Brisbane's conditions in mind and not typical conditions in mind, because of the fact that we are a bowl, we are a geological entity adjacent to a landfill area, so that the geological study should reflect the actual conditions rather than the typical conditions. Because they're using tables. We're asking, well, we're not typical, therefore a large portion of this report doesn't respond to the actuality of Brisbane, but to some quote-unquote typical situation that does not exist in our community.
Exactly, and that's what I want us to be characterizing, but if we don't cite it specifically, piece by piece, they're just going to gloss over it and say, well, this is the data we have, and this is what everybody else's uses, so BF.
I think we could do something like, make a general criticism that the report is, relies on a formula, is not specific to Brisbane in the following ways. A, topography, how the topography of Brisbane affects the travel of sound and the sound's impact in various locations. B, media through which sound travel, landfill, bay mud, blah, blah. Maybe there's another, particularity that applies to this chapter, but I think we can be sort of, succinct about it in those ways. And I don't know if that's what you were referring to, Mary, or not.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about. I totally agree with all your points, Michelle. I think every point you're making is absolutely wonderful and valid, and I support you 100%. I'm just trying to keep the rereading of the actual paragraphs.
Well, it's kind of hard to, I'm not sure how to make the point. I mean, one of them is, it says...
well, just assume that we've read it so that you don't have to spend as much time reading it.
Okay, but how else am I supposed to point out the point and what the point is that I'm making them what's wrong? But I'll try to be more succinct. I mean, on page 9, it says, it talks about the limit of noise in habitable spaces. So you have to keep your windows closed and your doors closed for the noise level to be fine, but I find that to be inconsistent with what I hope we'll find in the energy part, where we're going to use more, natural ventilation.
Thank you, thank you.
Is that what you're talking
That's-
about?
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, that came up in my mind too, because now we have to have air conditioning in order to maintain a habitable environment when this is all sealed off, and I find that unrealistic with energy reduction and our Bay Area climate.
It was my main comment on the whole chapter as well, that by the time you mitigate all the noise, you seem to have foreclosed chances to mitigate greenhouse emissions, energy use, and so on.
Yep.
All right, well, in paragraph 2 on that same page, it says both the lagoon and bait trail are considered sensitive, receptive, and it has a footnote number 2. And the footnote says noise effects on wildlife are in section 4C, but I could not find anything in section 4C about pile driving and about the effects of the vibrations on the eggs in the nests, on any of the animals that are nearby in the lagoon or anything else.
I think there is a section about noise impacts on aquatic life, but not on, I don't think, I have to go back and look at it again. I don't think there's anything about birds.
I didn't see anything,
Or-
and
or mammals.
but I just quickly scanned it. I haven't gone through that whole section yet, but I saw nothing about the effects of pile driving. And pile driving can vibrate the eggs and make them not viable. Pile driving will definitely drive out any burrowing animals. It will concuss any animals that are in the area. It will severely impact their hearing because they can't get away from it. And I didn't see any mention of any of that. And I did specifically ask those questions in the scoping document. And they don't mention anything about the effects on pets at all, of noise, vibrations, pile driving, etc. And people in Brisbane are very concerned about their pets. On page J14, I think we should question their methodology in terms of to determine whether the project site development would expose people to noise in excess of established standards, because these are all conditions that were modeled and based on future cumulative sites. And then the noise exposure map, as you pointed out, for San Francisco International Airport is not correct. And it also does not equal the reality on the ground. And then they talk on page J416 about the temporary increases in noise levels, but those temporary increases are actually extended over a 20-year period. I think they'll have severe, profound effects not only on people, but on property values. Construction-related impacts associated with implementation it talks about infrastructure improvements, but it doesn't talk about what about when they're doing the pile driving for the building, so it's sort of a little bit of a distraction there. Where's the rest of the data about for each building and how long it takes to pile drive a building? And then on 17, again, they use the word normally acceptable noise exposure. I object to that. And it talks about the conditionally acceptable means new construction, etc. Doesn't talk anything about the amplification of noise echoing because of the buildings themselves that they built or any other buildings. And I've found that amplification of noise against sound walls and buildings and other things creates specific noise environments. And on page 18, it talks about normally unacceptable versus. There's just a lot of characterization in here that does not talk about specifics, and it really should. And then in the mitigation measures, again, they talk about standards rather than specifics to our situation. And I think they mischaracterize the vibration effects on people. Again, on page 23. So, that's all I have.
All right, anybody else have any comments?
Juan and Kima?
Yeah, so I had one comment about the Bay Trail. They note that on the eastern end of the site, the noise exposure is at the upper end of what is acceptable for active recreational use, and they have like horseback riding, kayaking, and other examples, but the Bay Trail wouldn't actually be considered active. It would be considered a passive park type thing. So I think in that scenario, it wouldn't, as a park, it would be outside of the range. So I think they need to look at whether they characterize the Bay Trail as active or passive.
All right. Have we all said our piece?
Sean, do you have anything?
Just that we include the ongoing study that Margaret Tank Sound Receptor provides. Should be tied into this whole ball of wax.
Okay, well, it was a gruesome chapter.
There's worse to come.
Was there any mention of
This is
high-speed rail?
possibly the one that's going to affect
About the noise vibrations of high-speed rail?
the most.
No,
Okay, so,
just Caltrans.
yeah, so I'd like to add that.
Will be more affected
Stuart,
by this.
I have one more comment. So the high-speed rail is supposed to come through the Caltrans corridor, and I didn't see the noise levels addressed. Would that be appropriate for the plan to have to factor in an increase in noise level from the train?
My guess is what they would say is that would be part of the high-speed rail's EIR. I mean, you could comment on it, but I think the response back would be,
Right.
it should be studied as part of the,
Would they be studying the synergistic effect between the two
well,
different
sure,
projects?
I mean, the EIR should do the cumulative impacts. So their EIR should be based off of, should be cumulative to our EIR.
You know,
And
there,
since they don't have an EIR yet, we can't use that information for this one. It would be under cumulative impacts if it was going to be anywhere in here, I would imagine. But always good to put the comment in.
I didn't see anything about the noise impacts of the 173,000 truck trips that it's going to take to move the 2.5 million cubic feet of dirt.
Interesting. Thank you, Michelle.
I think that's a bit of a problem. So could you ask them about that?
Sure, we'll put it down as a comment.
Okay.
All right, Michelle, turning it back over to you.
Okay, so the next section that we were going to do is the cultural resources, and I confess that I did not get through all of my reading, probably because I'm reading it too in-depth, but I can't help it. So Barbara, you said you read the cultural resources. Do you want to lead this section?
Sure. I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. We didn't have a person on this chapter, did
was
we?
kind of me, but I haven't read it yet, so
Okay.
sorry.
I've read it too, so I'll help you.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to say about it, actually.
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, my notes are short for this one. I had some questions, and I bet Michelle can answer this. Is Ice House Hill really the only native soil out there?
No,
Native soil.
I heard her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. That's another mischaracterization from Chapter 3.
Yeah.
I think that there's still some native soils in certain sections around Ice House Hill and along the embankment of the Old Bay Shore. There's certainly some native stands of, or who knows if they're native or not, different plants in that area that would indicate that there may still be other native soils. I don't know for sure though, because I didn't go out and test them. And then what do you characterize as the native soil? How long has it been in place? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I felt like that was a very broad and sort of suspicious statement.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mischaracterization, especially since they haven't done any core sampling in that area.
And a good definition of native soil would be soil that has not been altered physically or with additions to its soil structure.
If there's anything like
I mean, that's a basic.
Yeah, I mean, and then if it has, maybe the native soil isn't very deep, you know, or maybe it's not well, maybe it's only covered by 3 inches of dust, it's kind of, just kind of iffy. I have my next question I don't understand anymore. It was on D25. I made some good notes, at least. I can find it again here.
While you're looking for that, I'll just bring up one question. In Sunday's newspaper, there was an article about how they found some incredible prehistoric animals in San Francisco when they were excavating for a building, and I would just like to make sure that we stay very aware of the fact that there's that possibility because of the mud flats that were once in that area. Even though they don't mention it at all.
It seemed to me, reading the chapter, that they actually did mention it, but they said there was very little prospect of running into anything like that because of the depth of the fill that's been put over the bay mud subsequently to the laydown of the bay mud. So it seemed like, from what they said, that there was very little possibility they would run into any fossil-type remains or anything like that.
So,
No, they don't.
Yeah.
But I felt their reason was pretty defensible. If they're at all accurate about the depths of fill, they're not going to.
Well, I didn't see any evidence where they did core sampling in certain areas that would contraindicate that, so.
on page 16, the bone storage house is an old building, but they omitted it from the chart, and I think it should be included in the chart, at least showing that it does not meet the historical criteria. Which, if that is in fact the case, they should demonstrate that by including it.
The which building?
The bone storage house, page 16. There was some old bone storage house that is mentioned. So the chart is on page 16, and it mentions the bone storage house on page 14, two-building warehouse that was constructed in 1945 and located at the southwest end of Industrial Way. Okay, I accept that that probably doesn't have architectural or commanding historical, but I think as one of the old buildings, it should be included and examined, even if they're going to make a negative declaration about it. In several places, it speaks to a reconnaissance level pedestrian field survey. I'm just wondering who carried out this, and what, I would like to know who this person was and what their possible point of view or biases were. Like if it was, Mr. Peters versus, somebody from San Bruno Mountain Watch, I would take that very differently, probably. Not to make it personal, but I guess I just did. Whoops. Delete. And then, so, I think this chapter, I'm going to go back and go speak generally. It was a good chapter. It was an important chapter, but given the landfill environment, I can understand their supposition that the likelihood of finding making a prehistoric find is pretty low. Mm-hmm. And I certainly hope that they will, if something is found, they will stop and take care of it. And it does seem to indicate that they will do that. On page 25, there's a map it says they reference maps of Brisbane from 1946 to 2005. And I was just wondering why they chose such a narrow set of information, since this has to do with archaeological resources. I know there are maps prior to 1946, and I would have expected them to use the earlier map, to include the earlier maps, since, our subject in this chapter is history. On page 32, no significant or indirect effect on the 7 Mile house, and I just went,
Yeah.
this is blatantly incorrect. This is definitely going to have impacts on the 7 Mile house. they're redoing that whole Geneva extension. I don't know how that just came out of nowhere for me. That was just like silliness, pure silliness. So those were my comments on the section. I kind of found it overall a sort of unimpressive section. So please, anybody else who has anything to say, just
I have something to say. Yeah. I've been on the Open Space Committee for, I don't know what, 10, 11 years, something like that. And this is not the kind of subject in general that we have been allowed to comment on. I don't think it's unworthy of comment. I don't think it's unworthy of study. But I would really like to get some clarification from the City Council about this, because in the past, some of these topics have been distinctly off limits for the Open Space Committee. The cultural, what I read from the Cultural Resources chapter, what I think is probably in the Land Use and Planning Policy chapter, public services, some of the utilities and service systems, land use and planning policy, population and housing. I have a feeling that our comments on those sections would be very circumscribed. And I would like for the City Council to clarify that for me, because of what our charge has been in the past.
I can ask the liaison committee to meet with you. I can see if they're available for your meeting on the 14th. If you want to have that conversation on the 14th, I'm not sure that they're available.
Sure, I mean, if I should make these comments as private comments, that's fine. Somebody tell me.
Well, I guess the only other thing
My other
is,
guess is they might want to meet you after the 19th to talk about timeframes. So I don't know. I mean, I can see if they're available on the 14th, but you might be after the 19th after they've got more information as far as timeframes.
I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've scheduled anything immediately in the categories that Mary mentioned, and I think that we should put off all those sections as long as possible.
I do have one question, though, more related to open spaces. Was there any mention about the ranch that's on Ice House Hill?
I wanted to ask about that, but I was a little afraid.
Because that is definitely an open space resource for us. And if it makes no mention here in the, I consider that to be a cultural resource as well as an open space resource. And it has historically been a ranch and grazing area for as long as I can remember. There's been horses on Ice House Hill. And that's not mentioned here at all. And that does come under the purview of the open space committee.
I was curious about that, but I was a little afraid to bring it up because I don't even know what the status of that ranch is.
It's leased right now by Dave Peters and a group of people that keep their horses there, and
What does the City Council's proposed plan say they want to do with that area? Do you remember?
no, I don't remember. You mean the community proposed plan, quote unquote?
Yes.
I wouldn't call it the City Council's preferred plan.
I would
or
call it
prepared
the City
plan.
Council's proposed plan. I don't think the community proposed it. I think the City
I don't think the
Council
current
proposed
City
it.
Council proposed it either.
Okay,
So I would prefer to still call it the CPP.
okay,
and
we
leave
can
it
do
be
that.
that.
Yeah, I don't, do you know what that, they say they want to do there?
No, I don't.
I would love to see that stay. However, I just don't see it fitting into UPC's plan anywhere.
Well, supposedly it's supposed to be left, but I don't know.
Really? Okay, that would.
But it's not mentioned, and so it should be addressed. And as both a cultural resource and an open space resource. And also as a contaminated section of it. Does anybody else have anything else on the cultural resources section that's relevant? I do think it's relevant of whether there's any native soils left or not. So, other than sections of Ice House Hill. So, we could go back to section 4A if anyone else had anything else on that. I haven't finished reading it. And so, but I will tell you that over the weekend, I did go sailing and took a lot of photographs, and I've been taking some photographs today to look at their photo points versus reality, driving down the highway. So,
We pretty much finished with that. Pass them along.
Question, Stuart, can we include a map that outlines, can we ask that a map be included in the report that outlines the existing gas transmission lines?
Sure, I was just wondering if it was under utility services or something, but sure.
I think I remember reading about the gas lines in the energy section.
Yeah, it might be someplace where we haven't gotten to yet, but I think that's a good note to make, put somewhere.
I think that one thing we do need to sort of hammer out before we go on to the next meeting is how we are going to approach this, because I feel like I'm being pedantic, going through it line by line, and yet I feel really, really strongly that if we don't do that, we are going to get screwed in the end. And it's great to make overarching comments and overarching questions, but it came down to the nitty-gritty stuff that we hadn't covered in past EIRs that left us vulnerable to another 71 houses without any addendum to the, or additional EIR on the area because conditions had changed and we hadn't taken it into account. And I feel kind of strongly that we're not taking in, if we don't go through it line by line, which is kind of what, in some cases, I think the council is expecting from us particularly in our areas. And so I'm kind of frustrated because I know you're frustrated sitting through it, but at the same time, I feel like it's important. But I don't have time to type it all out.
Can I say something, Michelle? I personally want you to have your time to go through things line by line if you feel that that's how you need to approach it. But I think we have to just watch the clock so that other people who want to make other specific line comments or overarching comments can also have time to speak without running us into midnight.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I'm not sure how to accomplish that. There just needs to be space for everybody. And I know you respect that because I know you're a good-hearted person.
Oh, it's
My
more
only
than that. It's
personal
just people have
suggestion is
different
maybe if you just pick up your 10 most important points and, and start with those. And then if we have time, I don't know. It's just a thought. Maybe it gives somebody else a good thought.
I guess my take on it is that, some of the comments are going to be general. Some of them are going to be very specific, like, a map does not show X or something. That's a very specific comment, and it's worthy of making. I think we're all reading this, and I don't think we collectively need to go through it line by line. My trust is that with, 7 people on this committee, and we're all reading it, and some of us are going to see different things. So I'm not at all convinced that the committee needs to spend our collective time going through it line by line.
But there are things I didn't mark anything that I didn't want to make a comment on.
No, I think every comment is valuable, and I think that they should all be submitted in writing and included in the report as a whole. Maybe we don't have time to discuss them orally, but I think they should be submitted.
Okay, if it finds out we have more time than October 8th, I'll write them up.
Yeah,
But between now and then, I do not have time to sit and write them. I haven't even time to finish the reading.
I understand, yeah.
And I'm hoping when we get to the energy and some of the areas that I don't know as much, that you will be even more anal retentive and detailed than I have been. Because I think that's what's required.
One thing we could do is, you could annotate these in a PDF file. Is that possible? Would that make it easier for you?
Not in the current time frame. Eventually, yes, that is what I will do.
Okay.
If we have longer than October 8th.
Okay.
Right now, I barely have time to get everything done I haven't gotten everything done that's on my plate.
And when are we going to find out, when is the city council going to discuss this?
It's on their agenda for August 19th.
Oh, my one thing that I was confused about my question on 4D, because I wrote down the wrong page number. It was supposed to be page 34, not 25. And it talks about Jeep-driven piles into bay mud. And I thought they were headed for bedrock in one of the other chapters. So I was wondering if that was an inconsistency or not. It may or may not be.
Yeah, some of these chapters, we're not going to know the inconsistencies till we've read the other chapters.
Yeah. So I just put it on my list in case it is, but we'll have to read further to figure out. That's it. I just was proud of myself for finding that lost comment.
So I'm still unresolved about how to, I mean, what's,
Maybe you could just say, this topic, did everybody else get this note, or, so that we don't,
did you think I brought up anything that was not significant or that we shouldn't comment on?
No. It's just that some of the things some that we'd already picked up on, maybe didn't need to be gone over a second time.
I tried not to mention
Okay.
these things again.
Okay, yeah.
I had marked them and skipped them.
Oh, good.
But, okay.
I'm trying to be constructive.
I know, and I'm trying not to, waste our time by going over it at too much level of detail.
No, and it's, I love that you pick up some of the things I don't pick up, but, yeah, there has to be I'm not sure where to make the compromise, because we got to get through it still.
When you go through it, do you take notes on the document itself?
Yes.
So maybe if you give me those like a day before the meeting, I can run copies of the chapter so we can pass that out your notes, and
I
then,
heard the ink wasn't dry when I got here.
sorry, I was just I'm trying.
I know, I'm sorry. Let's just.
No, I
go
understand
on.
the same thing, 'cause, I didn't read 4D, I read 4J today, but
Yeah.
I understand.
If you did it on a tape recorder, or whatever the new version of that is, and give it to the staff and let them write it out.
Michelle needs a copy of
think they should hear
Dragon Naturally
I think they should
Speaking.
hear some of those words.
Well, it's okay, we all say
I
that.
was gonna say, I'm a little young still to hear
Yeah.
everything that Michelle's
Well,
saying.
let's not beat a dead horse, and let's go on to, let's finish up the agenda and then adjourn for tonight, because, my husband said he forgot what I looked like, except on TV.
Yeah, there you go. I would also like to make a comment about what's scheduled for next week, one of which is the geology, soils, and seismicity.
No, you missed that part.
Okay.
You missed that.
Very
We
good.
did a whole rescheduling.
All right.
Okay, so just to go over it for next week, I've got,
Yes, of course.
you're gonna do,
Greenhouse gas.
I've got energy resources
Right?
And
greenhouse
gas.
gases.
And greenhouse gases will go first.
Right.
Energy resources will be second.
Yes, that's what I have for next week.
August 14th.
August 14th, which is also our regular meeting, we'll have a regular agenda, which Stuart will send out for us to look over.
Yes.
And we're currently still scheduled for August 24th for a 3-hour meeting on a Saturday?
We are, but my understanding from the committee that if you get a time extension, how about if we say you get a time extension past the end of October?
We
That
might
you,
cancel that, yeah.
And
that
we miss-
you
we miss
cancel the
out on the
24th?
double time and a half?
What?
We miss out on the double time and a half?
Yeah.
Yes, you do. You miss out on the double time.
You will get paid, you will get paid 50% as much again as you get paid for this meeting.
Well, yes, I get that. But my understanding was that if there was enough time to add additional meetings, you wanted to not meet on Saturdays if you could at all help it.
That was me. How does the rest of the committee feel?
I can't make that meeting anyway, so I guess I would prefer it didn't happen.
24th?
Right, so that was my understanding and I was just thinking if it gets moved past October, then you probably will have enough time to have, at the schedule of the meeting of the week, not to have to meet on the Saturday, the 24th, and we can find other meetings in October to do what you need to do. That's the impression I have.
So if I don't send you a copy of the 4J notes, poke me.
Here, yeah.
Okay. Literally or on Facebook?
Ping me then.
I'll email you.
I want to say something else about the geology, soils, and seismicity. I started to read this chapter, and it's kind of horrifying. And one of the things, Lloyd Zola is going to come back to the CAG meeting, which is whatever the third Tuesday of this month is. And I'm going to ask him to specifically talk about liquefaction and some of the stuff in this section, because it's hard to understand, and it's terrifying.
And you reminded me, Mary, that I did ask John if Lloyd was available on September 11th, and his response was yes, but do you want him on September 11th if you get a time extension? Or do you want him later? You can tell where the...
prefer earlier rather than later.
Okay, so September, I know...
Although I won't be here on September 11th.
Right.
But that shouldn't stop you from hearing
But the CAG
Lloyd's.
meeting would be on August,
The CAG meeting would be the third Tuesday is August 20th.
Thank you.
Right, but my understanding is that there's a lot of other issues on methods and studies other than just the liquefaction that this committee had that you want to talk about. I mean, we can say,
Oh, yeah. I just thought anybody else who
Right.
has that impression who wanted to come to this meeting, it might be helpful.
right, I'm just, and yes. I'm not trying to step on that, I'm just trying to know, do you want him on September 11th? Or if you get pushed back into an October, November timeframe, or December, January timeframe, whatever that is, would you rather have him at your regular meeting in October rather than the regular meeting in September? It's up,
I'm sorry, Mary.
rather September 11th,
I agree with Glenn. I'd rather
earlier than later.
later.
Would you rather have September 18th when Michelle is back? I know what Michelle said last time was that you already heard him for 9 hours, and
I'm sure he has lots more to say,
I'm sure he
and I
would.
intend to hear him at the BB CAG as well, but
It's up to you. I mean, at the
it's
moment...
really up to the committee what they would
Right.
like.
At the moment, I've asked for September 11th because that's what we said last time. And if you're going to have him on September 11th, along with a regular meeting, at the moment, you only have one other item, which is population and housing, which, that may be a good meeting just to have him in the regular meeting.
Well, frankly, if we get an extension, I'd like the regular meeting to be on the 18th and not the 11th, but that's me.
Oh,
But
so cancel the 11th, have it on the 18th.
that, what does everyone else feel about that? Because
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's
I really don't want to miss a meeting, but I don't want to miss going on.
Okay, so then it would be bad for me to bring Lloyd in on the 11th
Yes, very bad.
because he'd be talking to
That
the
is
room.
contingent on us getting an extension, which is not a done deal.
It is not a done deal.
We scheduled our meeting for the 18th.
What?
I thought we'd already scheduled our,
Well, you scheduled one for the 11th and one for the 18th, then you decided that the 11th would be your regular meeting with only one item, and the 18th would be two items.
okay.
Because I would rather miss Lloyd Zola than miss one of the items.
That was my recollection, which is reflected on the sheet of paper I handed out tonight.
And I also really want to say that I am very appreciative of those who do have the time to make their comments in writing and do make them, because I think the more detailed and more comments we have, the better off we are for the future. So do we want to go over the minutes from the last meeting and get those approved, so we can get that out of the way too?
If we could.
I have two questions, and these aren't on the agenda. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble. But I had asked a couple questions of staff last time regarding Section A, Aesthetic and Visual Resources, and I'm wondering if any of those got answered. I mean, I know two of them got answered sort of during the discussion, but the other two are outstanding.
I would say the answer is yes. I just didn't have time to print them off for you tonight.
Okay.
So I will. I will email you the answers.
Thank you.
Email them to all of us.
Yes. Well, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do I have a movement on, a motion on the minutes? Any changes to the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
All right.
Bring my